podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis Podcast. I'm James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. I'm wedged into what an estate agent would describe as a compact hotel room. I can tell you that currently my left hip is against my bed and my right hip is against the bathroom wall, which incidentally is entirely see-through. Overall, very fashionable hotel here in Glasgow, where I am for the Billie Jean King Cup Finals. They're very catchily named and very hard for me to say. As always, I've got George Bellshaw, the tennis writer, with me, and our resident tennis coach, Calvin Betton, to discuss everything that's been going on in tennis over the last 7 days. There is, of course, loads to talk about. The WTA Finals, well, the WTA Finals still hasn't finished, actually. We're recording this on Monday night, and incredibly, the WTA Finals finishes in about 8 hours' time. We'll discuss the whys and wherefores of that. We'll talk about the end of Iga Świątek's season. Alex de Minaur ending an 18-match losing streak with an absolutely absurd run against top 5 players. We'll talk about all the results in Paris, including quite a disappointing week for Britain's record-breaking field, but a very satisfying week for Holger Rune, slightly less so for Novak Djokovic, of course. And we'll also discuss why Nick Kyrgios has agreed to give a fan £20,000. We must start, though, with the WTA Finals, because technically they are still ongoing. It has been, George, a week. I don't think there have been many good news stories for the WTA, put it that way. We started by talking about ticket sales, which everyone was worried would be really bad, and frankly, they have been quite bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's improved a bit as the week's gone on, but it was pretty disastrous optics at the start of the week. You'll get a lot of people coming out, as I've seen on social media, defending the tournament, being like, oh, they only knew they were going to have it a month in advance, and the WTA was limited in options because they could only commit to this year contractually, so that kind of minimised the number of events that we're interested in. But I do just find it quite hard to believe that you can't integrate a couple of kids' days or whatever in Texas. I just don't believe that's that hard to do. Personally, I have no experience putting on events, but if you know you're really struggling with tickets and you're only selling them for $16 a pop, I think was the figures I've seen kind of popping around. Come on, you can't be serving up a totally, and it was totally empty, wasn't it? I mean, it was pretty shocking, and it's a shame because there have been some good matches and a couple of, it's nice to see. We'll come on to this in a bit, but it's nice to see someone actually beat Świątek, who, should be someone who can play someone who has been in the top 8 regularly for seasons and seasons, and we've kind of maybe been writing her off a little bit. That's the start of a potential storyline of someone who has shown they can be consistent as staying up there, but not quite done it at the slams, but has the weapons to beat Świątek, and just all feels a little bit flat again. And I do have sympathies with the kind of the China situation and what the logistical problems are, but I'm always just like, it can't be that bad. Come on, guys. Come on.
I mean, also, the China situation is not new. The WTA have taken, and I think quite admirably, some people disagree, but they have taken this stance against China over Peng Shuai for a long time. I think it's a year now. And they knew that they weren't going to relent on that. They must know that the Chinese government don't budge quickly. So how they only came to the point 2 months ago where they confirmed the replacement, how are they not looking at this 6 months ago and saying, or even earlier, even when they first did this with China, they must know it was going to be a long standoff, and they say, right, what's our contingency plan? What do we do? What's the biggest product that we're going to lose by boycotting China for 5 years? WTA Finals. And it feels to me like they've just ended up with a haphazard solution.
I think the other thing is that, we've sort of spoken about this off air about kind of the BJK Cup that's happening in Glasgow this week. There's certain venues you can pick that are kind of quite good for this sort of event. When you're doing it quite last minute, you don't know how many fans you're going to get. Even if the Billie Jean King Cup sold half the tickets, that's very kind of an achievable number. I'm not sure what the size is, like 1,500 or something.
Here,
But yeah, higher,
it's more
3,000,
like 5,000, I think.
5,000. There you go. Okay, well, Texas is quite a big, sizable stadium, and it just looks so bleedingly obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, the WTA Finals has been in China because the Chinese signed a massive check to have it there. It had a record prize pool the year Barty won it. It was the biggest ever prize money for a single women's event. And the WTA have got a hole to fill. So, and I'm not privy to those conversations. I'm not privy to that decision-making process, but they've got to look at it and go, who's got the biggest check to sign? And I can only assume that Fort Worth was the one that came out trumps. Now, how that happened, I don't know, because, and Calvin, we kind of touched on this a bit last week, or at least I certainly meant to, but tennis culture is a big part of selling tickets for these things. You talk a lot about the challenges in France and to an extent Germany, and frankly, a challenger-sized crowd in a challenger-sized stadium, if it's indoors, it's dark up top, people don't know how the small stadium is. I think that would have gone down better.
Yeah, I'd agree. It does have a problem, that tournament, as well, because you then wonder, like next year, say something similar happens, are the players going to be that bothered about going? Like, are they going to aim to go there? It's never really had the same feel as the men's, where the players are really desperate to get in there, and sort of come the second half of the year, the focus turns on whether the male players are going to get into the year-end finals. The women's has always kind of been if I get in, I get in. If not, it's no major sweat. And also, it's weird how they've done it. I saw today that despite losing every match she's played there, this is Coco Gauff's something like her sixth biggest point gainer, because she still gets 360 points or something from just being there, and that doesn't make any sense at all. How you can get that many points without winning a tennis match?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of people turning up, people will turn up because it's a lot of money. Like, it's a serious wedge of cash to set up and play that event, and I'm sure people will want to play it, but it is just a bit frustrating that this product is never quite being handled the right way. It's never quite being sold the right way. There are problems within the women's game in terms of consistency and getting those storylines going, but these are still, in terms of women's sport, this is the highest level of women's sport of any sport, in my opinion. It's the most developed, it's the most money, it's the most professional, and it's just embarrassing, like, having stadiums like that. It just shouldn't be happening, and it's not the fault of the players, it's the fault of the people handling it. And circumstances aside, it's just got to get better. This happens far too often, and they're taking quick cash without really thinking about how they're going to grow the game in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard, is it? They had a venue last year where it was a huge success, and they chose to not do it again. That's what I find most bizarre. It's not like we're looking around here going, well, where can we hold it? And there's nowhere you can hold it. Just move it about, I don't know however far it is, 1,000 miles south, and to the same place as last year.
I guess in terms of that, they kind of rewarded Mexico with a Masters 1000, didn't they? So I suppose that's probably why it wasn't kind of going back there. But
Italy has, in the men's, Italy has a Masters 1000, and it has the year ends.
Yeah. But I guess, from Mexico's point of view, they probably would prefer a more stable 1,000 versus a one-off.
Yeah, I guess
this is coming back next year. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know, but presumably the Mexicans only want to pay for one license. Like whoever the authority is or the promoter don't want to pay for two licenses, having previously had none. Like, from a budgetary perspective, that's quite hard work, I'm guessing, Calvin.
Yeah, maybe that's fair. I mean, I've seen some pretty. One of the weird things I've seen this week on Twitter is people suggesting ways that it could be improved, and some of them have just baffled me. Like, right, what needs to be done is this needs to be a 16-player draw knockout. I'm yet to be given a real reason as to why that would mean the tournament's any better or worse. It's just,
yeah, I mean, it's also like it's a specific solution for a specific problem that might not exist in 2 years or even 1 year. Because the idea, I would guess, is to think, well, if you pick 16 top players, then you're more likely to have all the stars who might be, 12th in the world this year. But, the whole point of the finals is that you've got the best people playing each other multiple times. I really like the format, for the record. I remember talking to Tony Godsick about the Laver Cup, and look, Tony Godsick is a brilliant salesman, and he said lots of things I didn't agree with that were sort of bump. But one thing I did agree with is that the problem with tennis tournaments is it's hard to sell tickets for like the middle of the tournament, like quarter-final day. You can't really guarantee you're going to see the big names. You can't guarantee when you're going to get them on or where you're going to get them on, and it makes it hard to sell tickets. Whereas with the group stage format, all right, you still have to take a bit of a gamble, but you've got much better odds of, say, seeing Rafa Nadal. Or, well, I mean, your odds of seeing Rafa Nadal at World Tour Finals are very limited, but that's because he's never there. But you know what I mean, like, it's the same concept. So I think the format's not the problem. I was talking to Mike Dixon of the Mail today, and he, you know, we were bemoaning it similarly, and he mentioned remembering the Virginia Slims Championships in the 90s when they had it at Madison Square Garden, and it felt like a massive deal. And okay, like, you know, we had Arantxa Sanchez, Jana Novotná, Lindsay Davenport, Martina Navratilova. Like, it was a big established field, but nevertheless, there is a lot to be said for looking at iconic venues and seeing that elevate the tournament. Like, you go to the US Open and talk to people who go to the US Open in New York, they don't know who's playing. Like, they're not there because they want to see Aryna Sabalenka against Caroline Garcia, which obviously happens to be the final in Fort Worth. They're there because they want to go to the US Open. So if you create an event that people want to go to, it doesn't matter who the stars are. Like, I mean, Calvin, you've presumably been to this. I went up to Shrewsbury last week to the W100 event there, just because it's quite a successful 100k. And it's successful because there's buzz around it. Everyone in the town knows about it. They do a little big tennis ball tour around the town where they have like 12 big tennis balls and you can like do a bit of a geocache thing. They run events like there's a marquee outside the tennis club and they run an event in it every night, whether it just be like a charity fundraiser or like a business networking evening, kids' careers in sport. And I don't know, Calvin, and you'll tell me better, but I don't think there are many 100Ks that have an event every week, you know, every night of the week.
No, I've not been to the 100k there. I've been to Shrewsbury Tennis Centre, but again, it's a tennis town.
Yeah.
And again, I've touched on this previously. The one thing that they have at Shrewsbury is that it's a club and they have good food there, and that's how you develop But that I joke about it, but that's how you develop a culture. That's how you develop where families will go. People will want to go. You can go and play tennis, and it's got a bar, as you'll have seen, James, and they've got a chef, and it's not expensive, and people go. It's not one of these places where, like most of the newer tennis centres that were built in the UK in the 90s, are basically 6 indoor tennis courts and a vending machine.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good while they're new, but you don't have any people there who know how to run tennis events. And you look at the best events in the UK, the Shrewsbury 100k, the Sutton British Tours, they're at tennis clubs by people who know how to run tennis events.
And I think what's interesting is that you mentioned the family thing. I mean, I was interviewing Marnie Banks, and we were sat next to the soft play, and it was busy, and like there were lots of kids there because mums had like come, and I think like some of their partners were watching the tennis, and they were looking after the kids, and then they'd swap over, and you know, it just creates, as you say, Calvin, it creates an opportunity for people to do lots of different things in the same place, George.
Yeah, and I think this is like the great frustration, really, is that it shouldn't be that hard to link up with the USTA and say, hey, where are your local tennis clubs around here? Where are the local schools? You know, okay, on the one hand, when you're trying to sell an event, you need big names, you know, and you'd argue this WTA Finals maybe doesn't quite have that beyond golf, like in terms of reaching your standard American audience. That's pretty tough. But what isn't tough is locating tennis clubs, schools, linking in with these people. The cost is low enough that there's just no excuse for not filling these things up, in my opinion.
In fairness, though, I know I've seen somebody say it was Houston, and then somebody else says Fort Worth. Are they the same place? Or
so Fort Worth is a different place. It's a different city, and I think it's just outside Dallas. But if you want, and I could be wrong about that, and I apologise, but basically, if you want to get there from Dallas, which I'm fairly sure is the city it's just outside of, it's virtually impossible to get there for whatever it was, a 5 o'clock start local, I think. And realistically, you weren't going to get there till maybe 7 o'clock, like after work, in which case you'd have missed half the session. Yeah, it is. It's just on the outskirts of Dallas. Like, it's this classic American thing where they call it a separate city, but like there's no break in conurbation.
But I know that, to be fair, like places like Dallas and Houston, they've got renowned country clubs there. There are people who play tennis in those places, so I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But there's a lot going on in those places as well. They're big university towns. They've both got NBA teams. The NBA is going on at the minute. They've both got NFL teams.
There's a lot of competition for eyeballs, and as someone pointed out on social media again, and I hate Twitter, but it's useful sometimes. There's a lot of competition in this part of the calendar for sporting eyeballs. Like it's such a crunch moment in the season for so many different sports that it is a challenge. And look, it's obviously a kind of. It's an unfortunate situation because it's a lot of cross-section of lots of different problems. But I think what we can probably all agree on is that running a tennis event is about running a tennis event. Like it almost doesn't. Like Wimbledon's attendance basically has a zero correlation with which players are playing. Like the year there was a massive boycott, I think over Yugoslavia. I'm going to get the year wrong, but I think it was in the 70s. Wimbledon's attendance went up. Like just because they ran things a bit better and like opened up a few more tickets here and there, and like the people don't really that often care who's playing.
Yeah, and look again, this is where you can find degrees of sympathy with the WTA in the sense that it's hard to build an event that's just popping up, moving around, not got that kind of long-term feel. So to just drop a tournament in 2 months in advance isn't ideal. And they signed a 10-year deal for it to be in China, which has obviously gone pretty badly, not necessarily their fault. But you'd still argue, they've taken a lot of deals over the last few years, which have been ridiculous money, don't get me wrong, and are vital parts of kind of the financial stability of that tour. But they've backfired quite significantly in terms of the product. And, that's beyond their control in some ways. But they've taken quick cash. It's never looked good, a lot of those tournaments over there. They've been empty stadiums there. They've struggled to build that kind of brand really well out there. So, regardless where this story goes, and I'm sure it'd be a pretty expensive contract to come out of, but you've got to make good, sound decisions for your product. And I don't think the WTA has made many of them for the last 5-10 years, to be perfectly honest.
The flip side, I suppose, is that chunk of the calendar, like the amount of money they got for it, like take the finals notwithstanding, that bit of the calendar, the post-US Open indoor autumnal swing, they did pretty well to make anything out of it. Where you look at it on the men's tour, and I don't want to compare the two all the time, but this chunk of the season, it's a bit like the post-Wimbledon bit. It's a bit like, no real narrative. Like, it's a bit of a race for the ATP, but that usually concerns about 3 or 4 players. Half of them have already qualified and the rest are out of it. I think in that chunk of the season, it's not the worst idea in the world.
I think this is another massive problem for tennis. Before we go too existential here, no one gives a crap about year-end number one, like genuinely outside the sport. Like you think about F1, the climax of the season, just to give a kind of comparable individual sport, the climax is always at the end because they're building towards this one great thing. It's so rare for it to ever be an interesting thing because you've got these slams that are so dominant. Like the season should end after the US Open, as far as I'm concerned.
100%.
US Open, ATP Finals, done. Have an off season, build up your narrative, go again. And this is like, there are arguments why you want lots of calendar events in terms of like giving people the opportunity to play. Looking at Calvin's guys, they're coaching. This having these tournaments, these chances to play is really important further down the kind of ladder. But I just think tennis needs to think sometimes about what its big picture is, what is the story it's trying to sell, and it needs to finish on a bang much more quickly than this kind of droopy end after the US Open.
Yeah, I think golf has done quite a good job of that, like with the FedEx Cup and the FedEx playoffs. That is too complicated, but it does at least, basically because there's so much bloody prize money involved in it, people seem to get quite up for it. I don't know, Calvin.
I've thought for a while that I don't see why, and it's always baffled me why the women's tour, why the WTA feels like it has to mirror the ATP tour and not do something completely different. And I think that the WTA could be much more successful if it tried something different by having maybe, I don't know how you do it in the calendar, but maybe just having like 16 tournaments somewhere and then a different tour further down where there's more things going on for the lower ranked players. But because it hasn't worked, that the best players haven't played as much, like starting with Serena Williams and Sharapova, they stopped playing as much anyway. So you had the tour was going on, but the best players weren't playing. But I think that is a way that the WTA could go in trying something different, trying a different model. And like George said, maybe have the season end earlier.
Yeah,
I think the ATP, I think, can go on. It could do with finishing a couple of weeks earlier, but I wouldn't finish it after the US Open.
I mean, I suppose it's what they tried to do with WTA mandatories, but and premiers, but it wasn't a clear idea, and it was too similar. And actually, sometimes what you want to do is, we'll take the really successful idea and we'll just tweak it so it's ours. And actually, to the viewer or the consumer, it's just the same. It's like, oh, well, that's basically the same because the big picture is largely the same and you ignore the details or you never find out about them. But yeah, there's something to be said for, like, almost going back to, like, the origins of the WTA and saying, like, the top 12 ranked players at the beginning of 2023 qualify automatically for these 12 tournaments, let's say, and you still have the Grand Slams and you still have them in the same kind of areas of the swing, but you say, no, we're going to have a 12 player tournament on 9 weeks of the year in these big places. We'll make it group stage so you get to see players play multiple times, and then you almost take the whole you've got to build your stardom thing out of people's hands. It's a bit like, no, well, you're going to play all of these tournaments and you're going to be at the latter stages of them because everybody plays until Friday anyway. And I don't know. The thing is that the WTA needs to go badly wrong to make those kind of radical changes. And I guess the Grand Slams are always going to prop it up.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'd agree with that, something like that, James. And I think because then, again, a problem that the WTA Tour has had is that the stars are going out early in tournaments, and if you did that, maybe have it as a round robin each week, at least you'd know that the stars are going to be in for 3 games, for 3 matches. You don't have to have the same scoring system. Try something else with the scoring system. Try different scoring systems at different events. Yeah. But it seems to be this focus on, and you could have some of the events at the same time as some of the men's where they have them now. Have Indian Wells, just have it different than the men's do. But at the minute, it's this idea of constantly trying, at the same time, trying to match the men's, but also acknowledge it or not acknowledging that it needs the men's tour, it needs the ATP tour to bring the crowds in. And I think that's where it's got a false sense of security. And I've thought that for a while, that this idea that the women's tour can sustain itself, I really don't think at the minute it can on the model that it's on.
Should we talk about some tennis? I feel like we've talked a lot about how to do tennis, but not tennis itself. I suppose the most interesting result, and the one that stands out, and the one that I woke up to and was most surprised by, is the semi-final defeat. Iga Świątek's season ends with a breadstick to Aryna Sabalenka. I guess, George, we've always talked about Sabalenka as the type of player that would beat Świątek. You know, she's got that bad matchup with Jelena Ostapenko where she's lost 3 times to her. And you would think, certainly maybe the 2021 Iga Świątek was vulnerable to those people who could take the racket out of her hand and get her moving around a bit more. I would say her defence has improved a huge amount this year, but I suppose you're always going to be vulnerable to someone like Aryna Sabalenka when she has her day.
Yeah, exactly that. I think, Sabalenka's probably one of the most permanently frustrating players on the tour in many ways. Like we've spoken about her, on the one hand, being really consistent. She is the most consistent player there's been over the last 5 years in terms of being in that top 8 all the time.
That's a good point.
I'm pretty sure she's not dropped out. And yet she feels so horribly, horribly inconsistent in many ways. And that's probably more from kind of a Grand Slam sense. She's maybe not had the runs she should have. And, Sabalenka's previous results to Świątek are like crazy bad. Like, literally, I think her best set is taking 3 games off her in their past 3 meetings this year. And she's just totally flipped that scoreline on its head. And, we really do want to get to a place where we have a belief that people are going to come into a match with Świątek and have a chance of winning. And Sabalenka's one of the few that has the weapons to take the racket out of Świątek's hands and anyone's hands. I don't see, I've said this multiple times at the minute. Goff ain't winning that matchup for a couple of years until she makes some kind of big changes. Jabeur will not win a slam if Swiatek is still in the draw. That is a horrible matchup. Sabalenka, stick her in a final against Swiatek. I'm not saying it's 50-50, but if Sabalenka has a perfect day or hits really big and really well, she can win that match much easier than people like Jabeur and Goff. Like, they need to play beyond their capabilities at the minute, in my opinion, whereas I don't think Sabalenka does.
I'll tell you one of the most disappointing things, and I'm going to say this, and there's a good chance I'm going to look like an idiot because you will probably listen to this podcast after this match has taken place, but the number of times Aryna Sabalenka has got through and played well, and then you get her into a matchup with another quite aggressive big hitter, and you go, oh, that could be a really exciting, slugfest. That could be some real, and she just absolutely flops. And I just think that final against Caroline Garcia, who is an exciting, aggressive front foot player, has the ability to be just one of the worst matches. That's my main concern at the moment.
I mean, Garcia's got just such a habit of absolutely bricking it in any situation where she can actually kind of make that next step as well, doesn't she? It's quite rare that you see her. Yeah, she's done better this year, and maybe it's a turning point. But you kind of got to a stage at the US Open, you're thinking, Garcia's going to actually really turn this on now. She's got over that mental hump, and then she plays probably one of the worst matches I've ever seen her play in the semi-finals, which is really saying something. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd probably fractionally favour Sabalenka, but not much in it. Should be interesting.
Irrespective of the result, Caroline Garcia has gone to the WTA Finals without her coach, which is, I haven't got the inside scoop on this. This is all over the French newspapers. But she had been working with Bertrand Perret, and about a week before WTA Finals, he said to the newspaper, I would have liked to go to the WTA Finals, yes, but I'm not a man of pretense. And when it's over, it's over. There was no point in prolonging it artificially. I preferred to cut the connection. Garcia then said in her public statement, I just would like to thank Bertrand and all the hard work we did this year. It was a great investment personally and professionally. We started far away and we came to the top of it at the end of the season. He has decided to leave the team after Mexico, and I respected the decision. I mean, I don't know if you're a man of pretense, Calvin, but presumably once you've had a breakdown with a player and your communication's shot, even if there's only one tournament left, you just have to walk away.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation like that, but it always baffles me. And again, something that seems to happen only on the WTA tour, where Joanna Konta did it a couple of times, where a player will have an unbelievably good year and then split with the coach. And it's you have to wonder what on earth has happened there that means it's irreparable, that you can't sort something out to just keep it together.
Yeah.
And you have to think it's either money or someone being unreasonable. And the money is usually solvable if one of the people isn't being unreasonable.
But also, the money is usually the explanation. And not that. And again, I have no knowledge of this one.
Yeah, I think sometimes, but I don't think all the time in that. I think sometimes you just get these situations that, just some madness comes in and other people get involved and agents and that kind of thing. And, it just baffles me when someone's had a good year.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the trade-off between results and good relationship? I mean, it must happen quite often where you're like, God, I find this person such a bloody bore to travel with, but we're doing quite well and they've got kind of good technical knowledge. How good friends in inverted commas, what level of that relationship does it need to be before it's kind of irredeemable? It varies.
It varies. Even myself, I've travelled with players who I get on really well with and spend a lot of time with them when traveling, you go for dinner and that kind of thing. But other players who I've coached who it's basically just on court, and and it's not that you don't get on with them, it's just that a lot of players tend to like their own time as well. They like to sit in there, especially these days. Players don't often go out for dinner even. They'll just order in and deliver it to the room, and so there's no real relationship there. But I can never understand how that happens at the end of a successful year, why you're splitting with the coach.
And let's be frank, and let's give her some credit. Caroline Garcia has had a successful year. The year of her life, I would suggest, probably going back since, George, do you think this is the best year of her career? I mean, she was obviously extremely highly rated and then had that big dip, but it's hard to say it's not, isn't it?
I think it's been the best year, and it's been the best year in many ways because she's actually had a lot more kind of mental scarring to shake off after years of a lot of disappointment. Like when she was first coming up and looking really talented, it's almost in some ways easier to have a good year. People don't know who you are as much, and you believe you're going to go on and be the best, and when that next step doesn't happen and you're rocked, you drop down, and she's dropped down quite significantly before. To actually claw yourself back up and make yourself one of the top 5, 6, I don't know what ranking she's actually going to finish now, probably quite high with this extra week. If she won this tournament,
four if she wins. If she wins the finals, she'll be 4 in the world.
That's an amazing year for her. That's surely her highest ever ranking. She's never been that high before, has she?
It'd be her highest year end. She did actually touch number 4 in the world before in 2018. Incredibly, yeah. I mean, just for context, she was number 74 at the end of last year. Like that. That's absolutely mammoth. It's remarkable, and actually, I feel like I didn't back myself enough on this when she beat Raducanu at Wimbledon. Is that right? And throughout that, I've therefore sort of watched her a fair bit. Obviously, the Raducanu match, and also like the rest of the tournament, just kept an eye on her. And her serving was incredible, and like her self-belief was out of this world. And I wish I had said a bit more strongly, she's definitely worth looking out for the rest of the year, because then I'd look like an absolute genius. As it is, I'm not. But more on that later. After the break, we're going to talk about the men's game. Welcome back to the Love Tennis Podcast with me, James Gray of inews.co.uk and the I newspaper. I've got Calvin Betton, the tennis coach from Yorkshire, and the tennis writer from Brumland, George Bellshaw. Before we move on to the Paris Masters, it's important to mention that you can always get in touch with the podcast. We really like hearing from people. It very often stimulates some of our most interesting discussions. Last week we had someone get in touch and ask why we were so convinced Coco Gauff would go on and win several slams one day, and we had a really interesting chat about that. George, you got a point to say about that? Oh, and she then had a terrible week.
I'm just saying, it's quite funny with that conversation last week. I mean, what did I say at the end of last episode? Oh, it'd be nice if Gauff could just deliver a statement win against Swiatek, and she didn't pick up a set in singles or doubles.
Yeah, it couldn't have been further from the truth, really. Coco Gauff lost all her matches in singles and doubles at the WTA Finals. She's due in Glasgow this week for the Billie Jean King Cup Finals, but she's not. I think she's arriving today on a flight, so how much she actually plays remains to be seen. But yeah, do get in touch with us. On Twitter, we're at LoveTennisPod. And you can DM us or you can mention us or whatever. If you want to email us, because that's your thing, it's lovetennispod@gmail.com. Or if you want me to read out your message, like guarantee I'm going to read out your message, then the best thing to do is leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate them. It makes us feel good. It sometimes helps us find more people as well. We've had a few reviews this week, some of which haven't got writing on them. I don't know what I mean by writing, words. But here's one that does. The review is just entitled Love Tennis Podcast. I assume it means that Tragic91 loves the tennis podcast. It says, been listening to this podcast for about 3 months now. Very informative and good insights into the sport. The 3 presenters have good banter between them. Well done, lads. Got good banter. And all bring something different to the show. The latest episode on the 1st of November was outstanding. The analysis about Emma Raducanu was amongst the best I've ever listened to, and the rest of the show was equally first rate. Thank you very much, Tragic91. And I'm assuming you're the exact same age as me, because you were born in 1991, so good choice. You're a good generation. We're okay. Please do leave us other 5-star reviews, and we will read them out, because it's a little bit of a kind of ego trip, let's face it. Now, moving on, we need to talk about the Paris Masters. I'm going to read you a list of names, and if you're playing along at home, you have to try and guess what they've all got in common. Stan Wawrinka, Hubert Hurkacz, Andrei Rublev, Carlos Alcaraz, Felix Auger-Aliassime, and Novak Djokovic. Yes, you guessed it, they all lost to Holger Rune in Paris this week. Scarcely believable run from the 19-year-old Dane to win his first Masters 1000 title, 29th of April 2003. That's not like the last time I cooked myself a meal with more than 2 vegetables in it. That is when Holger Rune was born. I hope that makes everyone feel extremely old. It's probably a new experience for you, George, being a bit of a child, but Calvin and I are used to being extremely old.
Younger than you.
I'm going to throw myself into the old category. I had a real middle-aged man moment today. I got a very early flight from London up to Glasgow, and I don't advocate flying internally, but there's a train strike on. And I snored myself awake on the plane, which was pretty humiliating. If anyone's ever done this, they will know the exact feeling where you go, and then you don't quite know what's happened, and then you realise, and then you look around to see if anyone's noticed. It was pretty humiliating. Fortunately, the two quite fashionable girls sat next to me were asleep on each other, so it wasn't so bad. I doubt Holger Rune has ever snored himself awake, being extremely fit and a teenager. George, he could have gone out in round one.
Yeah, he really could. Can you say, is it 3 match points against Wawrinka?
Certainly save match points.
Yeah, Calvin keeps accusing me of recency bias on this, but I think you really do have to start looking at Holger Rune's year as a whole, and it's really hard not to be bloody impressed. I mean, we're talking a little bit about kind of big rises this year. It's from Garcia going from 74 to 4. I mean, this guy's gone from outside the top 100, going to finish the year inside the top 10, and I don't think any of us saw that coming, really. I think if you'd have asked me where Holger Rune can get to this year, I'd have said top 30 would have been a really good season for him in terms of where he was at last year. I think the thing that just keeps impressing me, and this, is probably where Calvin will kind of point to the recency bias, is I just think he's got mentally stronger and stronger all year. He's always kind of had that attitude of being a bit, we've taken the mick out of him a bit for he's going to beat Rafael Nadal's number of French Open titles. He does have this weird, unwavering belief, and I think that will keep him being quite unpopular on the tour in the sense that he's just going to rub people up the wrong way and kind of says stuff. But I kind of think on the whole, that's quite good for tennis, and Rune being a bit of a wind-up merchant, but also quite good is a pretty good thing.
I would be interested to know, and it's not a statistic I've got to hand, but I was just looking at the titles that he's won this year. It's his 4th title of the year, and his first one was a Challenger in San Remo. I mean, presumably people have won a Challenger and a Masters title in the same year, but I can't imagine there are many of them. I mean, am I imagining that, Calvin?
Agassi won a Challenger and a Grand Slam in the same year. about 4 weeks apart, as I remember.
I had a really embarrassing moment. Speaking of Andre Agassi, when I was in Shrewsbury, it's a real random story from James.
He wasn't there, presumably.
No, he wasn't. I went. The football was on, and I just went to the pub to have a beer on my own and watch the football, which I quite like doing. Get good at doing things on your own. It's very good for the soul. And there was a pub quiz on, and these 2 girls dragged me into their team with no ulterior motives, I should add. And there was a picture around, and you had to name all these famous couples. And I did quite well. It was quite useful, and I just couldn't get this one. It was Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf, and it was just it was a weird angle, and they were kissing, so you couldn't see their full face. But they were I was so embarrassed, and I was like, this is particularly embarrassing for me. And they were like, why? I was like, because I'm a tennis journalist. And they were like, if you don't have to be on our team anymore.
I wouldn't have been telling them that.
But yeah, that's amazing. Agassi won why was he playing that Challenger? Do you know?
His ranking had dropped. His ranking had dropped down, and he won Wimbledon in '92, and then basically he got injured. I remember the year after that, he was coming in with some half serve motion, and then he basically just dropped. I think that might have been by his own admission in his book, I think that might have been his crack cocaine period.
Right.
Not crack, was it crack or crystal meth? One of the two.
Yeah.
And then he basically dropped low down, and then he set on Brad Gilbert as his coach, and he had to play challengers, and then I think he won a Challenger, and he got a wild card into the US Open and won the US Open as a wild card.
Amazing. Well, Holger Rune does not have a crystal meth problem, and he's also not won a Grand Slam yet. But if we give Caroline Garcia credit, Calvin, for going from 74 to 4 in the world, you probably have to give Holger Rune at least some credit from going 103 in the world at the beginning of the year to, as George says, we don't quite know how high he's going to go, but he's already up inside the top 20, and he could make it inside the top 10.
Oh, you got to get 100%. He deserves credit. He's won a lot of tennis matches. You can't bluff your way into the top 10 at tennis. Um, he's a good player. He's a really good player, really solid. And as George attested to, his biggest strength is he's got phenomenal self-belief. He really thinks that. And yesterday he would have counted himself as favourite to beat Novak Djokovic. And that's, it's sometimes you have to have that level of delusion. That's what basically makes great athletes. And he's a good player.
It's quite interesting reading sort of Novak's comments after the match. Novak, for all his flaws, is always incredibly complimentary of people who've just beat him. It's quite rare he completely throws a hissy fit and won't say anything about someone or really kind of dig them out. And it was quite an interesting question he was asked to compare Rune and Alcaraz. And I'm pretty sure we'd all think Alcaraz will have the stronger career. I don't think that's that controversial to say, not to put words in your mouth. But he was kind of saying that he felt Rune's backhand is the much stronger shot than Alcaraz's, and Alcaraz has the much stronger forehand. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, Rune's actually posting some remarkable speeds off that backhand that I've seen. Like it is a good shot.
My thoughts on big backhands, boys.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Sorry, Djokovic said that he thought the Rune backhand is better
than Alcaraz's.
Yeah, but I mean, Alcaraz's backhand's rubbish. Not rubbish. But, it's
a pretty good backhand.
Yeah, but it's definitely his weakest shot. To be fair, this US Open, I was amazed at some of the backhands he hit. Rubbish, I admit, is a bit of an exaggeration, but he hit some that semi-final against Tiafoe. His backhands just blew me away. Okay, interesting. I've got something interesting that Rune himself had to say, which was basically, he said, it was very emotional after the match. It's probably the best feeling of my life, my whole career. It's kind of a small dream come true, even though I have bigger dreams. Which, Calvin, I thought you'd like because of your love of players not really celebrating when they win the semi-final.
Yeah.
Calvin hates Holger Rune. Let's kill Calvin right now. Calvin's got a chip on his shoulder about poor Holger Rune. He's never going to compliment.
My chip on his shoulder is based on the fact that he's a bit of a dick.
And to be fair, George likes him because he's a bit of a dick.
No, but then as I pointed out in our WhatsApp group last night, when we used a different word than dick, but discussing what the downfalls were with people like that, it goes beyond just being a bit of a brat on a tennis court. I think he's just an unpleasant person, and that's the only reason. I think he's a really good tennis player. I don't think he's as good a tennis player as he thinks he is, but I think he's a really good tennis player. But I just don't think he's a very pleasant person at all. And I don't think he's even one of those. As I said, George, last night, I don't think he's even one of those guys who is a bit of a can be a bit of a dick on the court, but they're all right. I was hoping Medvedev would turn it into that year when he did really well, when he lost the final of the US Open. I thought that was quite funny. But Rune just acts like a spoilt child. And I'm certain that Wawrinka said those things because he'd have been entirely right in saying it. That's the thing. And it's like, when you're saying there he acts a bit that way on the court, I don't think he's ever going to get people to like him because it's not really an anger, it's just a brattishness that he has about him. Yeah, but we shouldn't talk about that too much. He won the tournament,
Yeah. But also what people will relate to the most is Holger Rune the person. We know that in tennis. I think the thing is, for me, he's 19, and yeah, he was talking like this when he was 16 and 15, and he was world number 170, and it meant nothing. And then he had that weird hairstyle as well with the elastic bands, which is as bad an offence as anything else. Hopefully he will grow up and learn, and there is definitely a world in which you can be a bit of a dick on the court and then step back over the white line and be a nice guy again. And it's kind of what we discussed about the Iga Świątek hindrance stuff. It's Iga Świątek's the nicest person I know off the court. It's ridiculous. She's so sweet and unassuming, but clearly has a little bit of white line fever and gets on the court and she's I'm going to do whatever I can to win this match. George, you had your hand up first.
I think we Well, look. I'll put this plainly. There have been times he has horribly crossed the line and been a horrible person. Which James, I'm kind of in the camp of you that I'm hoping that's kind of youthfulness and not going to be a.
Let me just clarify the specific incident that we're kind of talking around here. Is that when he was playing against Echeverry last year on the Challengers Tour, he was investigated by the ATP for yelling a homophobic slur multiple times across the net, calling him a pussy player and various other, one specific unpleasant homophobic slur that I don't really want to repeat, but it begins with F, and if you can't work it out, tough. And yeah, that's pretty unpleasant, and that is so far beyond the line. Just in case people don't really know what we're talking about. But it was one incident, and we shouldn't say he's a lifelong homophobe. That's not what that suggests. It's just that's the context people need for what George is saying.
Yeah, and I think this is, as you say, heavily not condoning that, and that's totally unacceptable. But I would love there to be a world, and whether this is Holger Rune or not, where someone doesn't grow out of this and is just an arse all the time, because let's be honest, it's quite interesting. If he was good and was just a complete twat all the time without going into that, completely unacceptable era, but was just unashamedly a bit of a knob, people would dislike him. But they'd feel something. And there's so many players. I've always said this about sports people as a whole. The ones you care about, they're the ones that make you feel something, and it doesn't have to be positive. The ones you feel nothing about are the ones that just will never sell tickets. No one will care. No one will ever be interested. And tennis has too many people who, frankly, it's not they're not interested, but they're afraid to show that they are interesting. They're afraid of this kind of fear. And Rune, for all his faults and that example where he went way horribly past the line and totally unacceptable, the good thing about him on the whole is that he is unashamedly him. He doesn't really give a crap what we all say about him, and he is a bit of a knob, and that's good. We care, we're bothered, we're talking about the guy, which I think is a nice thing.
We're only talking about him because he won. If he'd have lost in the semis, we wouldn't be talking about Holger Rune now.
Well, we might have spoken about the Wawrinka kind of row. I think that's always interesting. We've spoken about Holger Rune enough times where he's just had random spats with people.
Casper Ruud at the French Open.
Casper Ruud. There is kind of got this slight interesting. If he can win and be that much of a dick, that is a great combination.
I completely agree with the point you're making. I disagree with Holger Rune being that. I don't think he's compelling at all. I think what you're talking about is people who are compelling, and I don't think he is at all. I just think he's a bit of a brat. And I don't think there's any interest. I don't find that interesting at all. When Medvedev did it at the US Open, when he started arguing with the crowd, I thought there's something deeper than what we're seeing here. He's obviously an intelligent person. I think I'd quite like to hear this guy talk a lot more. I'm not remotely interested in seeing an interview with Holger Rune. I just think.
But is that because he's young?
No, I don't think so. Because there's been other players. I'm old enough to remember Andre Agassi when he was 18, and that he was a compelling individual. And I just don't think that. I remember Andy Murray when he spoke when he was 18 was an interesting interview. I mean, it probably wasn't much past that when he got into trouble for saying he hoped that Paraguay beat England as a joke that no one in the country got.
Yeah.
But I don't find Holger Rune compelling at all. I just think he's a bit of a
And we should also say that not many 19-year-olds, even in tennis, are compelling. Carlos Alcaraz is not a compelling
No, he's not, no.
talker.
But he's compelling on court, isn't it? And you watch him, and he's got that
I don't know if he is compelling on court. He's just
Alcaraz.
The way he kind of drags people up.
I think he's flamboyant and he's an extrovert. I don't know if he has a charisma about him, and I think that's the thing. There's a difference between flamboyance and charisma. I don't think he's that, but. I think also, go on, sorry, James.
No. Well, I was going to say the way crowds respond to Carlos Alcaraz, they really respond to him. And we might not think he's compelling, but I think that crowds in stadiums do. And that you can't quantify that. You can pump your fist at the crowd all you want, Tim Henman. It doesn't always work, and there's just something. There's a je ne sais quoi there. We're going to move on. There's lots more to say here, and we'll say it lots over the next couple of months. Because there's some things to say about Novak Djokovic. he is historically the best player ever in Paris at the indoor event, I should say. There are very few stats that he doesn't basically top. I think maybe, is it Feliciano Lopez has played the event more times than, or is it Verdasco?
It's Verdasco, but he's equalled him this year. That's the stat. So he's now taken every stat. And I just thought that was so interesting this week. Like, how often do you have that kind of complete ownership of like most titles, most finals, and most appearances? Actually quite hard to marry with like most titles and finals in a sport, I think. And there are some other things in there as well. I can't remember what they all were now, but
yeah, you annoyingly sent it as a link, George, rather than a screenshot. So I don't have it immediately to hand. But yeah, I mean, look, the guy absolutely crushes Paris-Bercy. Calvin, apart from the fact that he's basically the greatest of all time, why do you think Djokovic is so dominant at Paris?
He manages his season well, usually, doesn't he? Doesn't go and play. Anybody is always going to be better in Paris if they're not massively chasing points as a rule, and he tends to not because he's already in the year-end finals, and it's on a medium-placed hard court indoors with no sort of random factors that can come into it, and he's been the best tennis player in the world for the last 10 years. So that's why he's so good at it. That's the best players in the world will tend to win in those conditions.
George, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously one of the best indoors players of all time as well. I think probably. I mean, it's hard to say what exactly is Novak's best surface. I mean, traditionally people would say he's the best hard court player of all time, and then Roger's been better on grass. But in my humble opinion, the way the grass has gone the last few years, I think Djokovic will steam past Federer and make a little case to be best grass court player beyond that. But
how many Wimbledon titles is behind at the minute?
2, maybe.
Needs another 2.
Seems achievable.
Yeah. I mean, we should say on that he's when we're talking about grass now, as George has alluded to, that it's not the same grass as what it was before. I think I'd still say Federer is the best grass court player of those lot on proper grass, not the Wimbledon version.
Yeah. But yeah, look, the other thing I wanted to say about Novak this week is that, you know, we had a bit of a chat last week about people not qualifying for the ATP finals, and he's done a bloody good job actually to qualify of his own rights. I know obviously everyone didn't have points for Wimbledon, but you know, he's not had points for the US Open or the Australian Open, and he's not played, I think, 4 Masters events this year. Like, to actually come 8th in the world is a pretty good effort, considering how few points he had available to actually kind of do that.
I mean, his efficiency,
crazy, right?
His efficiency is very high this year. He's had a very efficient season, I would suggest. Which is, you know, I mean, that is tennis in the end, isn't it? It's about economy of movement and expenditure of energy. I mean, I don't think there's an argument. Like, yeah, he's really good at tennis. Like, I saw all these people like posting loads of stuff on Twitter, being like, "Oh my god, he's only played these tournaments. It's outrageous." You know, Djokovic's done this. I was like, "Oh, yeah, what's your point? Like, he's one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest player of all time." Alan Partridge shrugged, Jeff.
Yeah. I put a tweet out about it, kind of saying, you know, I think this shows Djokovic is still the best player of the year, or best player in the world at the minute, which I know we've kind of discussed to death on this podcast, but I did kind of add the caveat, it's largely of his own making, and that did not
that is
well
some
with
bait.
sentence.
That is some bait, George. You've just dangled a sausage there, and it has been scrumped up. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I don't know, Calvin. You're presumably not going to disagree with that.
No, I mean, what? That is his own making? No,
that he's you know, he's one of the best players in the world, if not he's the best player in the world, if not the best player of all time, and therefore doesn't have to play many tournaments to get as many points as like Andrei Rublev.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, you can't disagree with it. I mean, what I think is most fascinating is that I think we can also acknowledge that he's no longer the best version of Novak Djokovic that we've seen, and this is what the fascinating thing is, that the guy. I mean, how much realistically, what are we saying that he's lost since his peak? 20%.
I like in terms of the actual tennis, it's gone down quite a lot. Like, the last few years, and there've been a lot more kind of weird results where Novak of old would definitely have wriggled out of tough situations because of like genius.
Well, even that last night,
doing well.
Even that last night, he wouldn't have done that.
Well, he was up a break, wasn't he? And he served for it.
He had a point for 4-1.
And he still had break points like right at the end. I mean, that last game, did it last 17 minutes? Something like that. Was that an utterly ludicrous kind of final game where Rune was desperately trying to get over the line and Novak was just hanging in there? And, this is the thing I think that you're kind of alluding to there. He's still mentally the best when he wants to kind of be there. The thing that's not quite come there is the actual incredible tennis that was there. Still pretty good, don't get me wrong. But he knows how to manage matches, and there's no way, in my opinion, Holger Rune wins that match over 5 sets. That next set is Novak winning it 6-1.
No, but I saw Patrick McEnroe said something about this, and I just think that's a ludicrous argument to make. Like, it wasn't best of 5 sets, though.
No, I know. Like, that is just Novak, isn't it? That he has these massive sets, but best of 5, and then he'll just blow you away.
That holds as much weight as the people in football who compare like. Now they go, well, this Man City team's the best team ever because they got 96 points, and like such and such team only got 64 points to win the league. Like you get as many points as you need to win the league, and you win as many sets as you need to win the match.
I guess the point I'm making is that like I still think no one navigates a best of 5 sets match like he does, and that's really
probably not. Yeah,
but where we're kind of are on the tour at the minute is like. I think there'll be significant chunks taken out of him, and there'll be chinks in his armor that are appealed. But Rune getting over that sort of 2-1 lead, then having to come back out and go set after set after set again, that's when Novak is at his best mentally. The way he just doesn't switch off after that sort of set is straight back in and goes, and that's caught enough people out over the last few years. Tsitsipas, Musetti, Sinner, all those big matches, they have big monumental efforts to get in the lead, and then Novak goes bang. And that one moment they're rocked, it's so hard to come back because he's just relentless. I think that's still going to be the pattern at the Slams next year for me.
Well, we shall see, as I'm so fond of saying. We're going to move on because there's an 18-match streak that Alex de Minaur has scrapped that people may have heard me allude to in the intro, maybe going, I don't understand Alex de Minaur. He's won quite a lot of matches this year. This can't be an 18-match lead streak. You're right. However, let me paint a picture. 4 years ago, Alex de Minaur played against a singles match against a top 5 player for the very first time competitively. And he lost a 5th set tiebreak to Alexander Zverev in the Davis Cup. What he might not have thought is he would play another 17 matches against top 5 players and not win a single one of them. Barely, in fact, pick up a set. It's one of the odder runs for a guy who's been in and around the top 30 for the last 3 years. But he has finally snapped it. He beat Daniil Medvedev 6-4, 2-6, 7-5 in the last 32 in Paris. A slight funny story about this. I was in Shrewsbury and Katie Bolter came in for an interview with a couple of us, and she had her phone on the table. She said, sorry, tense moment, it's 5-all in the third. And for people who don't know, Katie Bolter is dating and has been for quite a long time Alex de Minaur, and she put the phone down on the table. She did 15 minutes of interview without once even... It was open and still playing, and at no point did she glance down, to the extent that when we finished, someone said, oh, he won, and she's like, shut up, did he really? Which I thought was actually really impressive. I think if my other half was playing like a career-defining match, I'd have probably sacked off the interview. Calvin, Alex de Minaur is a funny player. I was thinking about this earlier today when I knew we were going to talk about him, because I sort of think of him as a throwback. Like, there isn't really another player like him in the top 30, and it makes me wonder if there's a ceiling on him to a certain extent.
I'd agree with all that, yeah. He's, as I've said before, I think he's probably the fastest player that's ever been on a tennis court in terms of getting around. But the reason why he's not beating the top 5 players is he just doesn't have a whole lot of firepower. And I think that's always going to be the case. And I think we'll see his career. He'll have one of those careers now where he pretty much does what he's done this year, I would think. I don't think he'll go higher than he's been. But I think he's definitely not going to drop any.
George?
Yeah, I mean, I think since 2018, when he first cracked the top 30, he's wavered between a max of 15 and a low of 40, but generally been kind of 20 to 30. It's possible for him to maybe break the top 10 at some point, given, some big guys will drop out there and he's a fairly steady Eddie. But I agree with Calvin. He just lacks that firepower. What he does have, actually, in terms of firepower, is like great counter punching on the stretch. Against Medvedev, he really turned that match by his ability. He's really, in case you've not watched him before, he's absolutely rapid, Minaur. And it's that counter punch where he's kind of out really wide on the court. He's got a good kind of slap forehand, bang backhand where he can kind of get wide quickly and counter punch. The issue is it's quite hard to keep making that shot time after time after time after time. And, it's a fairly long, strenuous playing style. So, yeah, I'd be shocked if he ever went higher than like 9 in the world. And I think he'd do well to break the top 10, to be honest.
I think I would agree with that as well. That said, we've got a habit on this podcast of putting ceilings on players, and they consequently beat them. I mean, I guess what funnily enough, what Katie said as soon as he won was she said he's worked so hard, and Eleanor Crooks, who was with us from the press association, she said, "Oh, he's played really well this year, quite a lot," and Katie just said, "Well, make sure you tell him that." And there is an extent to which if you've got elite level talent, at some point, if you work hard enough, George has just had the lights turned off by his partner. It's very funny. There is always going to become an opportunity, and I do wonder whether that can kind of present itself to a player like that. Let's move on again, because we're running out of time and there's loads to get through. I probably won't dwell on this, but a disappointing week in Paris for the Brits. Dan Evans, Andy Murray and Jack Draper all losing in round 1. Cam Norrie made it to round 2 and then lost to Corentin Moutet in an absurd match, which started just after midnight in Paris. It didn't finish till 3 in the morning. I wanted to just not to discuss it necessarily, and maybe we'll come up another time, but I wanted to mention something that Yasmin Syed said on she works for The Express, people may know, she's a tennis journalist, she's obviously a young woman, and she pointed out that one of the problems with having these incredibly late night matches, and this disproportionately affects women, is going home after a match. Not many people want to go to a tennis match if it involves having to go home at 4 in the morning. That can be quite an unsafe thing to do in a lot of cities, and it's just something I hadn't considered, because that's kind of like male privilege, right? You don't have to worry about this stuff.
Yeah, and from a kind of advantage versus disadvantage background in terms of making tennis more accessible, what transport's running at that time? Realistically, looking for a cab, that's expensive. That prices people out. That adds an extra 20, 30, 40 quid on your day. It's so stupid, and we're not going to dwell on this too long. I just want to say, sort your bloody life out, tennis. Stop putting things on at such ridiculous time. Why are there 6 matches scheduled on that court in a day? That's mental. And night sessions, get rid of them. They're rubbish, and they're so dumb from a ticket holder perspective. Tennis, sort your life out.
Well, especially the late ones. I mean, the thing is, for me, is you've got to be more pragmatic, and you've got to go, right, it's 11 p.m, and we're still at least a set away from this Nadal match. It was Nadal before, I think, finishing. Norrie, you're playing on court 1. I know we had you on centre, and we'd love to have you on centre, but it's that or, finish at 3 in the morning. I think you have to be more pragmatic as an organiser, because that option was there, I think, Calvin.
I think, that probably would have happened, but knowing who he was playing, I assume that Corentin Moutet would have just disagreed with whatever Cam Norrie wanted to do.
Yes. I mean, Corentin
and
Moutet,
whatever anyone else in the room wanted to do.
You think Holger Rune's a dick? Corentin Moutet takes it to a whole new level. Yeah. Other interesting developments in Paris: Carlos Alcaraz retiring with an injury and then ending his season early, which, I mean, he would not have taken lightly, because he was obviously due to play ATP Finals. He was also due to play Davis Cup Finals in Spain for Spain, which would have been a pretty special occasion, despite his famous loss to Felix Auger-Aliassime after winning the US Open and becoming world number 1. So we await. I think, am I right in saying it's a knee injury, George? Have I made that up?
I think.
Right, another
He
Ab
had a
injury.
knee problem the week before. So, yeah, it's been a long season. It's been a pretty poor start to being world number one, but we can maybe put it back to fatigue and
Yeah.
maybe he'll kind of bounce back. I don't think there's any long-term concerns about Alcaraz, despite our disagreement on how much he'll dominate next year or not.
Nick Kyrgios has paid £20,000 to a fan who he called drunk out of her mind at Wimbledon. She turned out to be a Polish lawyer, and she felt she had been defamed by him, and consequently brought a suit, which was then settled for £20,000, which has gone to charity, incidentally, for people who might be interested. I don't know if she represented herself, and I don't know if she billed some fees that she may have been paid, but either way, all's well that ends well, and it's nice to see someone being held accountable for their actions on the tennis court. Very finally, Harry Kane has been mentoring Emma Raducanu, according to an Athletic headline today. I'm told, not really, they had 2 conversations, but, that's news for you. And very, very finally, because we have 90 seconds to get it in, Henry Patton's won another 4 matches and another title, and Calvin, it just it's happened again, as Arsenal fans are so keen of saying.
He's actually won something more that Arsenal haven't, so for a long time.
Yeah.
It's happened more for him than it has for them.
And he also beat along with Julian
let's say
Cash.
he played with Julian Cash as well.
I know. But he also beat another one of your players. They also beat Luke Johnson out in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
How much did you talk to the 2 players before that match?
I said I'd speak to them both about their own games, but I wouldn't discuss tactics for the other player.
Okay. And it was a pretty close one.
It was the best match of the week. It was a real top class, exciting doubles match. It's the best match I watched all week in Paris or in Charlottesville. To be honest, really good standard doubles that wouldn't have been out of place at a Masters series.
Well, we await probably not much longer until we get those 2 at a Masters series, we hope. This has been everything from the Love Tennis podcast. There's been plenty to listen to. Please do make sure to come back next week and we'll have even more.
Sports Social Podcast Network.